Good afternoon, everyone. I will be discussing a brief section of a leaked and classified training manual and how it serves as a narrative to control political enemies of the state in conjunction with an unfolding economic collapse, and not just an earthquake. To get a better understanding as to how fragile and manipulated our economy has become, I encourage you to read my article as stated in the description of this video below, titled, "Who Runs the World?" to get a better idea as to how an economic collapse can unfold by design and how a narrative based on a crisis by accident can be used to encourage following unlawful and unconscionable orders. Okay, now back to the narrative of controlling political enemies of the state. If you go to the article posted on Infowars.com titled, "Homeland Security Exercise Targets Free Americans Against Socialist Tyranny," and if it is the goal to condition government agents to harbor a prejudice against another group, this is one effective way to do it. Just arbitrarily present a group as a target to run an exercise against. Before moving on, I wish to not only thank Stewart Rhodes of Oath Keepers for providing the conduit for such a fellow and noble oath keeper for providing the public with this information, but also the source itself being noble along the lines of Eric Snowden and Bradley Manning. Now I will move on to section 6.1 of this manual titled Cyber Operations. The atmosphere to imagine is immediately after the imposition of martial law, and they referring to those who are ultimately responsible for producing this manual are leading you to expect a disruption in communications and are framing the context and how it comes about. And I will get into that a bit later with a concept of which you probably never thought of. And by the time I am finished analyzing the contents of this single page of information, you will definitely have a clear idea as to how this serves as a narrative or how such a context can be used to persuade you to either aid in the commission of or directly commit unlawful and unconscionable acts against peaceful individuals. By looking at the first paragraph, I believe it is intended to keep this exercise as a secret operation, just by keeping the actual practice confined to the use of a classified network, of which CIPR, standing for Secret Internet Protocol Router, is. And I can understand why. It is because of individuals like myself that are able to show you as to how this is just a superficial narrative to condition you to view peaceful dissent as nothing more than something dangerous, baseless, and senseless, of which you are being led to accept as the truth to justify using force or some other means to silence any individual promoting it. Now, in the second paragraph, there is a term referring to anti-government. I just wish to let you know that I stand for self-government and a society that condemns the initiation of force against human beings. But you will be led to believe that since I oppose tyranny with respect to a fictitious organization, Free Americans Against Socialist Tyranny, and actually stand for self-government as opposed to global government, and along with the idea that any right that is a true human right is inherent, this manual would represent me as anti-government. If you wish to develop a better understanding of the philosophy that I advocate, refer to the link on the Declaration of Natural Rights below. Another word to bring out is anti-U.S. rhetoric. And honestly, you really should ask what constitutes anti-U.S. rhetoric, besides the government being accused of staging, in this case, an earthquake, just to see if the producers of this manual really can account for themselves, since the term is presented so explicitly. I guess in this case, you should contact the North American Aerospace Defense Command and asks for the Northern Command White Cell Controller, if you are able to. I can only wonder at this point if the term also encompasses those who believe that our government should be held accountable to the rule of law, or specifically individuals like myself who advocate the ideas of the non-aggression principle and who would look upon a government to be violent if it forcibly suppresses peaceful opposition. And there is one more question on this point of which I wish to bring out about the government of being accused of staging anything in general. There is a fine line between accusing an institution or an individual of an act versus a claim of belief of such involvement and providing support and evidence. So the question here is, would an individual be regarded no differently than one who makes baseless accusations as opposed to one who claims a belief of involvement and provides support and evidence? So far, someone like myself gets the impression that I would be treated as someone making baseless accusations when claiming a reasonable likelihood of government involvement when the information of a particular nature that the government presents has no merit in justifying activities allowing that government to exercise a greater degree of ownership over the lives of the people. For example, if you read one of my articles titled Upholding the Second Amendment, I refer to the Sandy Hook shootings, of which the official cover story of a lone wolf gunman, Adam Lanza, was solely responsible for the killings, and that this information is the basis to justify weapons ban. But I claimed that the official cover story has no merit based on the school surveillance system being withheld from the public, and individuals who have given press interviews seem to have acted like crisis actors, purporting the belief that Sandy Hook was staged by the most profoundly corrupt elements of the United States government. There is another concept to introduce, aside from the questions of what constitutes a baseless accusation against a government, and that is the possibility if our government would be capable of creating such an organization, of which its very fact is kept hidden from you and only known by the president and his cabinet, plus any potential foreign entities wielding a substantial degree of economic influence of which the leadership of our government might report to. For example, it is widely supported in the alternative media that the Treasury Secretary attends Bilderberg meetings, which is a technical violation of the Logan Act, meaning government officials are prohibited from negotiating with foreign representatives, especially in secrecy from public scrutiny, unless specifically authorized by the Congress. Now, moving on to the topic of internal sabotage. This seems to be a way of instilling a prejudice that if you do not agree with what your leaders tell you, you are a threat. Maybe that is what they mean when they state the greatest threat is current government employees sympathetic to their cause. Really, they need to do some serious explaining to all of you when they are giving you the impression that you yourself can become a saboteur. For they made it clear to you when they started to treat you like an enemy, then perhaps you are their enemy, ultimately implying they are at war with you. And since they made the first move or first offensive against you in this case, you now have the moral high ground, for their moral high ground is fake, since they are merely and superficially presenting themselves as a symbol of authority, because this is how it currently stands. You are now in a moral position to organize amongst your fellow brothers in arms and fellow civilian co-workers to make it clear that you will not support any unjust or unconscionable order that a civilized people would look upon with shame and depravity. I just want to honestly let you know at this point that since you can be detained indefinitely without charge or trial, referring to the National Defense Authorization Act, I have no doubt that they will try to strategically dispose of anyone that they think is a threat to them, and the greatest risk is to delay and do nothing So let's make it a point that they run a great risk to themselves if they choose to use force against you for acting peacefully. Ultimately, they are becoming paranoid, if not afraid of you. Now, ask yourself, how would an enemy behave if they took control of our government as if the enemy hijacked an airplane of unsuspecting passengers? Well, I guess the last thing they would want is negative attention, which is why they are getting you to spy on your fellow soldiers or fellow civilian co-workers. And this is what they ultimately fear of what such negative attention brings: a massive response to disobey unlawful and unconscionable orders. It seems so far from my analysis that you are being conditioned or led to believe that the people who would call for an orderly and peaceful dissolution of the United States government, which would be a result in moving towards self-government, leaving the state and local governments to decide how to manage the daily activities of their respective territories, as individuals who are purely anti-government and espousing anti-U.S. rhetoric to be forcefully dealt with. Whenever you think about that question as the new litmus test in the military, will you fire on Americans? Maybe the more accurate question is, will you fire upon peaceful Americans en masse, calling for an orderly and peaceful dissolution of their government? And now I will present a variation of allitery from a well-respected advocate of the non-aggression principle, Aaron Hawkins of Storm Clouds Gathering, in which you will also find on YouTube, titled, Remember, Remember. All right, here it goes. Remember, remember the 5th of November. These wars of aggression, this police state oppression, hinges on our cooperation. It's not the one at the top of the command or the pyramid that has the final say, as most have been conditioned to believe. The truth is, no one stands above you, for in 300 years, our bodies are just dust in the wind, and the queen and the pawn end up in the same box. There are no bonus points for being a good little slave. There is no retroactive compensation for a lifetime of indentured servitude. Plus, there is no honor and bound down to those who have none, who claim to be our rulers. Until we take our power back without asking for permission, until we get off our knees, stand up on our feet, look him in the eye, and openly state, "You don't rule us. We rule ourselves." Only then will there be justice, peace, and freedom. Finally, I will present my motto in memory of James Boyd, a homeless victim of an excessive use of force by the Albuquerque Police Department, and specifically against those who fantasize about having power over the life of another, ranging from the House of Rothschild, who is the primary owner of the Federal Reserve, to just that sort of government agent who would enjoy following orders in the initiation of force against peaceful people. We will not be silent. We will not obey. We will not allow your lust for power to destroy our love for freedom. We are the conscious movement revolution.